Okay, everybody. Thanks very much for your patience. Now, our first witness is David. Do you want to just say next slide whenever you need me to advance?
Yeah. Well, when Martin said, let's talk about AI, I said, okay, let's see if I can make an animation film. Next slide.
Oh, Tom, do you want to... Actually, Tom, do you mind...
Yeah.
Thanks, driving that one.
Okay. I have to confess, I'm here on false pretenses. I'm an engineer who aspires to be an animator. And I'm hoping that Martin and Will and the guys at Farnham will save me from a death, a horrible death as a boring engineer. And hopefully I'll die as a qualified animator. So I'm BA on my gravestone. So if anyone's going to cheat at AI, it's me. So Jim there, who's my mate, he's absolutely devoted to AI. It's taken over the world, everything's fabulous, it's really horrific and so on. So anyway, we had to go. So next slide. Right, that's how it turned out. Engineers are arrogant. Why engineers should want to do animation, I don't know. But anyway, we're arrogant, an arrogant bunch, and I'm arrogant as well. So it doesn't get knocked out of me by Martin, I'm sure. Next one. Okay, so I produced. Now, right, I wanted to make the film I wanted to make, not one of whales swimming down Oxford Street that AI wanted to make. I wanted to make a film I wanted to make, and I knew Jim would be upset because basically I decided that the outcome of AI is going to be a legal case somewhere. Does AI learn? In other words, it's inspired in the same way that I'm inspired by Chuck Jones, or does it steal? Or is it changing from one to the other? And so I decided that in this case, the film will be about the legal beagle. If you do an AI beagle, you'll get Snoopy. So I drew a legal beagle, and the men in the white wigs are going to decide, will decide eventually on what is theft and what isn't. And so I made up I made a script, I put some ideas together, I put some pictures together and said, righto Jim, can you animate that then? Anyway, back came the reply. Next slide. Yeah, he was a bit evasive, but on the phone call he said, could I provide the animation? So I said to Jim, I thought that's what AI would do. He said, well, no, not really. And don't spend too much time on them because I'm not sure they'll work, just one or two maybe. Most text images offers free trials and they're a bunch of robbers and it doesn't work. And it doesn't do things when you follow the prompts, and it's not the lawyers, it's the scammers who are scamming everybody on the internet trying to tell them to sell you all this AI software. So, I was stuffed. I promised Martin a video, what should I do? Next slide. So I went on the internet, and it's pretty obvious who they're aiming it at. Certainly not anyone like me, and they're obviously looking for clickbait. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with anime, lovely, I mean, it's great, but it wasn't what I wanted. Next slide. So I found a tutorial that looked sensible. So I got my own back and stole his IP. So the rest of this is non-AI, manual, not intelligence, looking through what he actually produced. And he said, I spent 150 hours making my own anime with AI. A 1 minute anime in 150 hours. So, right, given that I would have made that Beagle video in a couple of days using PowerPoint, because I'm not an animator yet. But I'd use PowerPoint, a couple of days would have done it. Right, so let's see, next slide. Yeah, and what he came up with at the beginning, yes, this looks really good. Maybe it's easy after all. Could I be wrong? No, and be assured, AI is going to be good eventually, one day, maybe. Next slide. Anyway, he started off with the story. ChatGPT, something like that. No, he wrote it, he stole it from the Matrix and just wrote it down. 1 minute. So it was right. So that was a bit disappointing. And then he produced a manual storyboard, and I thought, this isn't engineering type producing a storyboard, there's hope yet. So that wasn't a very good start, was it? Next slide. Then the producer couldn't draw. Now, I can't draw, but I have to go at it. And I'm sure if Will were here, he'd be criticising me like mad. But anyway, the producer couldn't draw, so he used rotoscoping and showed how, obviously here, Max Fleischer animation, which is a good example. Next slide. And rotoscoping is a 100-year-old technique, so I hardly think it's AI. And obviously in doing this, the technique that you're starting to come up with is they're looking at various kinds of edge detection. So this is straight out, this is very old technology that's having some additions added so that the computer is able to distinguish the positions of things and the edges of articles and separate them out. Very positive. There's one very good video I saw where someone actually took a film and you got the two characters there, and by identifying the outlines, the film was able to separate these two characters. Okay, that's great, but it's rotoscoping, it's not the sort of artistic animation you'd expect here. Again, hardly high tech, this has been around 100 years. Next slide. What about the 12 principles of animation then? Don't mention that. That does not go down well with engineers, I can tell you. So we'll forget about that, it's too hard. Next slide. Okay, another problem for engineers. We're a pretty dull lot, really. We've had any kind of creativity beaten out of us over, in my case, a 5-year apprenticeship. So creativity, no. And therefore acting is really difficult. And you know what? Even with rotoscoping, you've got to act a bit. And then it was, oh, why did I choose a dialogue scene? Because lip sync's really difficult. Because obviously he's not got any of the timing charts. He's relying on rotoscoping, but his dialogue's being recorded separately. So he's going to be sort of stretching frames and all the rest of it that you end up bodging when you're not a proper animator. So that was another problem. Next one. Okay, he then got really enthusiastic about creating, in fact in another video, creating your model sheets and so on. And that was a bit hard if you can't draw. And that could take a long time, it's a bit difficult. So they went from, we'll use our own database to teach the models, which I thought that was really good, a good intention. Then, well, okay, well, we'll just go off and use the internet. Which is, I think some of us here, and probably I agree, is stealing artwork from the internet, but it isn't a direct, I've pinched your picture, there it is. It's I've pinched your picture and a load of others. It's the same process that we use, like I'm really inspired by Chuck Jones. I don't think anyone would ever think my animation was as good as Chuck Jones, but I still take cues from those sorts of people. And I think that's where legally we need to start finding out who owns the inspiration. It probably doesn't matter if you're an amateur, but it really does matter if you're going to make millions out of it. And you notice I posted my puppet. If anyone wants to join me on puppet animation, if you make millions, please remember a poor old pensioner. Just remember me and you will, or my will, that'll do. Next. Right, so obviously went on the internet and all sorts of lots of technical stuff here about diffusion and all the rest of it. But nevertheless, using what were obviously puppet pictures or pictures on the internet and creating pseudo drawings. I mean, we've been producing pseudo drawings by doing change something using a pencil or a pen or whatever for years. It's nothing new. So sort of AI is improving the quality of what we've been doing for yonks. Next one. And all of them saying, I can produce an anime in 35 seconds. Why anime? Well, it's popular. It is very popular and very much enjoyed, and goes from really, really poor quality animation, which is little more than an animated comic, right up to Miyazaki. It's got a huge fan base, so if you're looking for clickbait or to sell a cheap program, you've got it there in anime. But also it has huge numbers of rules. I don't know whether people program it into AI, but for instance here the tropes. Now, every kind of young lady you can imagine are all defined, which is, from someone who's worked in the computer industry, definitions of what we like. You know, wow, we can make something really work with that. So anime has this structure that kind of, I think, really helps. And then there's a huge amount of uncontrolled fan art. It's all there, so yippee, they're able to use it and has lots of benefits, but I don't think there's anyone here who produces anime. Next. Okay, off he goes. He's going to start now, and what he found was that his system was processing each frame individually. Oh dear, and every one of them here, you notice, is slightly different. So 2,400 frames is slightly different. So that's using a lot of computing power. He had to rent computer capacity to do it, and needed a lot of frigging about to get a consistent character. I didn't understand what he was doing. I think you did. You do. Yeah. But this was certainly a big thing that he went through that was something that would have defeated me completely. But yeah, 24 frames a second is an awful lot of processing power. Next. And clearly the guy was getting absolutely fed up, and he said, well, that's just a background, we'll have a picture. So he stole one from somewhere or another. I think that's from The Matrix or something, the blue and pink pills. I take lots more colours than that every day. So he started blatantly stealing stuff, and okay, fine, he's doing a demonstration, I don't mind. Next, voice acting. Yippee! Of course, we've got lots of voice programs. Oops. In that one there you can see it's got 4 different characters, ladies, gentlemen. I don't know if the announcer on Radio 4's AI, he sounds like it, it was very good. The voice acting wasn't easy. Again, he's an engineer acting. Why not go and get an actor to do it? There's plenty of them down in Farnham. And he very easily, and you could tell how he was very easily ending up in the uncanny valley. You could tell it wasn't right. Not that it wasn't good, it just wasn't right. And he was aware of that, this guy. Next. So anyway, at the end, I thought, maybe AI has done it. No, it hadn't. The whole thing had to be finished off in After Effects. Fair enough, lots of people use After Effects, but it's not AI. And he then edited it in Final Cut Pro. So this is a 1-minute animation that's ending up using pretty much conventional editing and post-processing. So that's fine. Then he realised that anime is at 12 frames a second, so he had to slow it all down to make it look like anime. And actually anime goes from 8 to 12 frames or more, and anything like slow in, slow out will disappear. So again, that wasn't terribly AI, but nevertheless it made it look more anime. The animation wasn't so good. Next. Okay, so 1 minute of second-rate animation. I think we could say that an anime of this type isn't what necessarily we expect from good artistic animation. Using a stolen story, rotoscoped images, stolen model sheets, and stolen background artwork, took 150 hours. Fair enough. That's 4 weeks. I've got better things to do in my life. Next. Okay, I did a cost comparison. I may have got this slightly wrong, but it's not far out. I was told by a very charming ex-animator from Farnham that when they're pushed, they do a foot a day at 24 frames a second, which she said was about a second a day. So I assumed they could do 2 foot a day at 12 frames a second, 3 foot a day with an allowance for limited animation techniques and not using the 12 rules. So an animator would take 20 days to do it, 140 hours, and using AI rotoscoping and stolen artwork, 21 days or 150 hours. And why anyone like Disney would take engineers who are rare as hen's teeth and use them to replace animators who are also rare as hen's teeth, I have no idea. No, if you've got skills, use them. It may mean you've got to retrain animators, it may mean we change the way we work, which might be really exciting. But why cut down your opportunities for manning your company? Next one. So what we're up against, what we're all afraid of, and maybe we don't need to be. This was Chuck Jones on Leon Schlesinger. Schlesinger was actually out for the money and he didn't care how he got it. Recognise that? He was very lazy in the sense that he never bothered us. He didn't want to have to make artistic decisions. He wanted the pictures to go out, play and make money. And that, I guess, describes Disney nowadays. They are in a real, they're really having to churn stuff out, and all that wonderful work that Walt Disney did, despite being fascist, is kind of rather going to waste. Next one. So AI is just a tool, self-learning systems. Been around for donkey's years, it's getting better and better, but according to IBM, it is years and years, maybe a decade, from actually being intelligent. It passes the Turing test because it seems intelligent, and it is slightly more intelligent than a lot of people from where I live in Aldershot, but we'll put that aside. At the moment, it's a bit opportunistic. Businessmen seem to want to use AI to steal IP from social media. And our careless use of social media may have made things worse. Maybe we could have been more careful, more thoughtful before we went to it. But there are existing laws, plagiarism, copyright, theft. I think we've got to make sure that from a legal perspective, we understand AI so that we can then lobby and get the proper rules in place. Engineers would hate that, they just want to be allowed to do as they like. As artists, we've got to say, here's the limit. If you use my art, you've got to pay for it. Because I've got to make a living. If I didn't pay, took your car that you've designed and drove it away without paying for it, you'd be upset as well. So we all have to pay each other, because that's how we live. So, action guys! Man at the barricades!
And I think a round of applause for that. Can we have a few questions before we move on to our next speaker? While David's talk is fresh in our minds. Does anyone have anything? Any takers? Or we could always press on.
I think it's a very entertaining talk, but I think it's unrealistic in that there is such good stuff about. I mean, I could show you something that my friend made in 2 hours, which looks like a festival film, and then we'll show you if we have time. I don't think it's realistic to think that it's so impossible. I remember when I was a student at the Royal College of Art and computers were just coming in, and I remember my teachers going, a computer will never be able to make animation. No, it will never be able to make animation. And we all went, 4 of us went to try out the computers, and they said, no, don't bother. And I can just remember that sort of panicky, sort of dissing of a new technology, I think is not helpful. I think it's not realistic, it's not helpful. I think we've all seen beautiful stuff actually made with AI. I think it's probably true what you say, that to just go in and expect to be able to do it straight away, it takes expertise for sure. But
That was
I don't-
exactly the point I was making.
Yeah.
It
But
is
I mean,
a-
it
it is-
takes AI. You need to know your program.
You've got
you need
to know what you're
find
doing.
the right. Yes, absolutely.
And what we've actually got to do is create an environment in which that happens.
Yeah.
So I was actually animating with Disney Animation Studio in the 80s, and it was a real challenge. It was really difficult. So you're absolutely right,
Yeah.
100% right. It ain't going to go away. It's going to be there. What we've got to do is the obsolescence.
Yeah, and also, is it realistic to say, well, if we're, I don't know what everyone thinks. Is it can you tell if you've been plagiarised if you're one of like 1,000 sources for somebody's animation?
That's why
Can
we
you?
need expertise
can you
to
tell?
actually tell us what is the new law around copyright and plagiarism.
Sorry, no, go for it. Go for it.
Rather than this being a sort of a production issue, I think you can also look at it from a consumption side and a sort of a media literacy side, because it feels like this kind of wave of AI generated content is pretty much inevitable. And some of it's going to be great, some of it's going to be, and I think most of it's going to be absolute trash. And we already see a lot of generative work out on YouTube, which is like systematically lowering the standards of people. And we see these kids that are raised on these kind of like really strange YouTube videos, which are like, okay, here's Spider-Man and Elsa from Frozen, who kind of go and rob a bank together, and like there's like thousands and thousands of these videos put out there. Like this guy James Bridle wrote an essay all about how concerned he was about all this kind of generated like crap that's effectively out there. And I think we should be worried about the sort of people that's creating, and we need to sort of think, rather than worrying about like, are they stealing from us or not, it's like, how do we train people to actually say, oh, this is good stuff, this is bad stuff? How can we sort of create a culture that really values the good stuff? And I don't know how to do that necessarily, but I feel like this battle has already been lost in a way.
I actually made a sly comment there that where I come from, an order shop, it's renowned in Hampshire and Surrey as being a fairly poor area. And you see an awful lot of people who don't make that decision as to whether stuff is of good quality or not. And you're absolutely right, if people will watch it, we can't do anything about it. Does it matter if they're showing that they are used stuff that is rubbish? If people are prepared to pay and someone to do it, it's not affecting us.
Yeah, but I think that on top of that, it's important to recognize that what Ruth said, which is the AI has the capability to create some really fantastic new stuff and to sort of like help us think in new different ways. And as artists, I think it would be a shame to sort of to close off that possibility.
I only have 5 minutes.
Okay, well, shall we move on to our second speaker, Alan? I'm just going to have to move the technology around ever so slightly.